I will never forget the day everything in our village of Oko turned upside down. It was the night before the New Yam festival, and the palace was in chaos. The king, usually a calm and calculated man, was pacing back and forth in his chambers like a trapped lion. His voice thundered through the palace walls. "Who dares bring shame to my house?" Beside him, the queen sobered uncontrollable, clutching her daughters, Ada and Amaka, who stood silent with their heads bowed. The chief priest, Ogbonna, knelt in the center of the room, his face expressionless, as if he were carved out of stone. But the worst part, Ada's boggling belly and Amaka's timid confession of her own pregnancy made it clear that the rumors spread through the village were not just idle gossips. My name is Obi, and I was there that night as the king's personal guard. I stood in the corner of the room, invincible but present for everything. What I saw and heard that evening still haunts me to this day. The village of Oko had always been a place of deep tradition, where the chief priest was second only to the kings in authority. Ogbonna, with his flowing white robes and deep commanding voice, was both feared and reserved. He performed sacred rituals, settled disputes, and was said to be the earthly mouthpiece of the gods. No one there questioned him until that fateful night. The king's twin daughters, Ada and Amaka, were the pride of Oko, beautiful, intelligent, and virtuous. They were seen as untouchable, destined to marry noblemen from neighboring villages to strengthen alliances. That was why the revelation of their pregnancies, both fathered by the same man, was a blow no one could have prepared for. It all began weeks before the New Yam festival. Rumors started spreading like wildfire. Some villagers whispered that the twins were glowing in a way that was not natural. Others claimed they had seen Ada sneaking into the sacred grove late at night. But no one dare voice their suspicions openly. It was not until the royal midwife confirmed the pregnancies that the king was forced to act. That night, a secret council was called in the palace. The king's most trusted men were summoned, myself included. The twins, after much prodding, confessed that Ogbonna was responsible. The silence that followed their words was so heavy it felt like the walls would collapse under its weight. How? The king finally glowed, his voice barely above a whisper. How did this happen? Amaka, the quieter of the two, spoke first. "Father, he told us it was the will of the gods," he said. "He said our wombs were chosen to bear sacred children who would bring blessings to Oko." Her voice cracked and she burst into tears. Ada, more defiant, added, "He threatened us, father. He said if we refused, the gods would curse the land and our crops would wither. We were scared." The king turned to Ogbonna, his eyes blazing. Is this true? The chief priest remained on his knees, his head bowed. My king, he began, I only did what the gods commanded. The twins are indeed chosen. Their children will bring prosperity to Oko. You lied, the queen screamed, pointing a trembling finger at him. You defiled my daughters. You have brought shame upon this house. What followed was a night of turmoil. The king, torn between his duty to uphold justice and his fear of angering the gods, was paralyzed with indecision. The council was divided. Some argued that Ogbonna should be executed immediately, while others warned that killing the chief priest might invite divine wrath. As dawn approached, the villagers began to gather outside the palace. Word had spread, and the people were demanding answers. The once respected Ogbonna was dragged out before the crowd, his hands bound, his face still held calm. The king addressed the people, his voice steady but heavy with grief. Ogbonna has betrayed our trust and defiled the sacred bond between the gods and the royal family. But as your king, I must seek the gods before passing judgment. It was decided that Ogbonna would undergo Ikuchi, the trial by fire, to prove his innocence or guilt. If he survived walking through the sacred flames, it would mean the gods had sanctioned his actions. If he perished, his guilt would be confirmed. The trial was held the next evening in the village square. I stood guard at the edge of the crowd, watching as Ogbonna stepped forward, his expression unchanging. The flames rolled high, casting eerie shadows on the face of the onlookers. The entire village held its breath as Ogbonna stepped into the fire. For a moment, it seemed as if he might emerge unscratched. His robes didn't catch fire immediately, and he walked steadily, chanting prayers under his breath. But then the flame engulfed him. His screams pierced the night, and the crowd erupted in chaos. Women wailed, men shouted, and the children clung to their mothers. When the fire finally died down, only ashes remained. The verdict was clear. Ogbonna had lied. In the days that followed, the village tried to heal, but the scars ran deep. The twins were sent to a distant village to start anew, far from the shadows of their shame. The king declared a period of mourning, not just for the defiled sanctity of his family, but for the trust that had been shattered. As for me, I left the palace soon after. The events of that night and the trial had shaken my faith in everything I believed in. Even now, years later, I cannot look at the sacred grove without remembering the horrors that unfolded in Oko. The day the chief priest impregnated the king's twin daughters was the day our village learned a painful truth. Even the holiest of men can fall prey to the darkest of sin. And when they do, it is the innocent who bear the heaviest burden.